In the decade since 9/11, the US has had its attention focused, not unnaturally, on the two wars it's been prosecuting in the Middle East. But what's happened during that period is a significant change in the landscape in the Asia Pacific. In particular, the rise of China's military power and the economic might of China has meant that the US's once unchallenged primacy in the region is now coming increasingly into question. The United States has realised that it needs to reassert its presence in the Asia-Pacific region, and we've seen a series of visits by high-profile people, including the President and the Secretary of State, Senator Clinton, through the region, reassuring allies and reminding us all that the United States still sees itself as a Pacific power. One of the foundations of American power in the Asia-Pacific has been its military might. But today, the ability of Chinese forces to project power into the South China Sea, and more importantly, to deny that area to the United States, or at least ratchet up the cost of any potential operations in that area, has seen the US starting to recalibrate its military approach. And there's a number of factors that are playing into the US's emerging strategy. First and foremost is that their forward deployed forces in places like Okinawa in Japan and in Korea, and naval forces in the Western Pacific are increasingly vulnerable to attack by Chinese both ballistic missiles and long-range cruise missiles. China has been taking very much a more assertive stance in the South China Sea, and in fact has territorial claims that involve most of the area, which has made the other countries increasingly nervous. In the past, the unresolved competing claims have been issues that have more or less been allowed to just tick along. But these days China is increasingly asserting its own claims, and countries like Vietnam and the Philippines are starting to feel a little nervous about it. The action's not entirely in the Pacific. There's also increased strategic competition shaping up in the Indian Ocean. We have India as another emerging power that sees itself as a great naval power. We have a string of Chinese interests in the area, and of course the United States has an enduring interest in the Indian Ocean and has a major naval base more or less in the middle of it. So those three powers will be increasingly competing for naval supremacy in that arena. And between the Western Pacific and the Indian Ocean sits Southeast Asia, and in particular there's some key shipping routes through there and what's called strategic choke points like the Malacca Straits, where a very large quantity of trade going to and from North Asia has to pass through a very confined patch of water. America is developing a military strategy for the Western Pacific called the air-sea battle concept. One of the key components of the air-sea battle concept is the ability to employ a distant blockade to stop trade moving by ship to North Asia. And the bottlenecks through the Indonesian archipelago are a key part of that. And that's where Australia starts to enter the picture. Geographically, we're located more or less at the crossroads of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, and our west coast and our offshore territories in the Indian Ocean provide very convenient staging points for any US forces involved in operations to implement a blockade, or just to provide a strategic presence around those important shipping routes. Australia is likely to be asked by the United States, or indeed to offer to the United States. Officials from both sides have been talking openly about the possibility of a greater US military presence here. I think what we're likely to see is more US ships and aircraft staging out of Australian territory, both at the mainland and the offshore territories. Probably Fremantle, possibly Darwin, Christmas Island, Cocos Island are all possibilities. Australia will be taking a more active role in an American presence in our immediate region. Well, one of the issues to be wrestled with here is whether this constitutes Australia choosing sides between China and America. And there are certainly some commentators who are saying that we should think twice about doing that. I think my argument would be that Australia has already made its decisions. We are a very strong ally of the United States. The judgment has been made within the Australian polity that the alliance with the US provides us with much more than it costs. And I think what we're actually likely to see with increased US presence in Australia is a reaffirmation of an existing relationship rather than the establishment of a new one.